Podcasting from her kitchen table, it's Jacqueline J. Here with another episode of Cast Iron Skillet Chronicles, where we focus on faith, family, fun, and finance for my fierce, fly, and fabulous sisters over 40. Come on in the kitchen. Coffee's brewing. Pull up a chair, and girl, let's talk. Now, here is your host for Cast Iron Skillet Chronicles, Jacqueline J. Welcome. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Cast Iron Skillet Chronicles. Today, we have in the kitchen Dr. Kela Henry, author of Nia and the Numbers Game. Also, a sponsoring author of the upcoming National Black Book Festival, taking place October 24th through 26th, 2019 at Fallbrook Church in Houston. Dr. Henry, welcome.
Thank you, Jacqueline, for having me in your kitchen.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming. So if you would, please tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Again, my name is Dr. Kela Henry. I'm a family practitioner. I'm also a speaker and award-winning author of my book, Nia and the Numbers Game, A Teenager's Guide to Education, Relationships, and Sex. So my goal is to teach young ladies about the importance of gaining an education, the consequences of sexual activity, and how to manage relationships with their parents and peers. Now, this month, I'm actually celebrating the 1-year anniversary of the release of my book. And Excellent. To celebrate October being National Book Month, of course, I'm offering people to purchase the book and get one of my pens for some of the journaling that's available inside.
Okay, excellent. So how can folks go ahead and obtain their copy of the book and the pen?
Well, they need to go to my website, drkelahenry.com. That's drkelahenry.com. Also, it's available on Amazon as well and on Barnes & Noble.
Excellent. Now, Dr. Henry, what prompted you to write the book?
Really, Jacqueline, that had to do with the interactions that I was having with young ladies who I met in my practice and who I met when I was out doing some of my speaking engagements for some of the local nonprofits who serve teenage girls in the area. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I encountered several times is moms finding out that their daughters had lost their virginity and then bringing them in for an appointment to see me. Mm-hmm. One of the things I picked up on is that oftentimes the mother had not had a very in-depth or realistic conversation with their daughters about the consequences of sex. Mm-hmm. We know that teenagers are going through a lot of changes, right? With puberty comes mood changes, physical changes, all of that. And for a lot of young people, they think they're in love for the first time. And mm-hmm. young ladies especially believe the things that the boys they have crushes on tell them. Mm-hmm. But often they don't necessarily have the most realistic view of how things will turn out in mm-hmm. the event of an unintended pregnancy or a sexually transmitted infection. Right. And so I realized this was something that I could do to help bridge the gap and start those conversations. Often the moms don't necessarily feel very comfortable discussing sex with their daughters beyond the typical, it's a sin, God wants you to wait until you get married, mm-hmm. that sort of thing.
Right.
The reality is that although I do think it's best for abstinence to be the number one step and go mm-hmm. to, the reality is that not all young ladies are waiting. And right. so I just felt like we needed this book. And that's some of the feedback that I'm getting from people who've read it. I've had several people to say, I wish I had a book like this when I was growing up. And so that was really the inspiration for me.
Excellent. Now, you also mentioned that you're a speaker. When you're giving your speeches, are they geared primarily toward the young people or toward their caregivers or both?
Actually, both. So I've been asked to speak to young ladies a few times, particularly around the education piece, helping young ladies through that process of getting into college. But I
Mhm.
also was asked by a group of parents to present to them about sexually transmitted infections. So I
Mhm.
do that speaking as well. I would say I focus more on the education piece because we have, of course, a lot of young ladies who are in high school right now. And so we
Mhm.
help them to prepare to get into college. For parents who didn't necessarily go to college themselves, they
Mhm.
may be somewhat confused or bewildered about how to navigate that whole process. And so I address that in the book as well.
Okay, excellent. Now, we were kind of speaking a little bit in the kitchen before we actually got going here, and speaking about older parents and maybe grandparents raising their grandchildren and teenagers and that whole piece. Now, what advice would you give to maybe an older parent, either that has teenagers, folks that are coming up on their teenage years, just about to go to college? What would be one major piece of advice you could give to them in either initiating this conversation or delving into some of these issues?
Well, the first piece of advice I would give them is to understand the conversation needs to be had and
Mm,
then to actually to broach the conversation. So if it's coming from the older parent or grandparent, to
mhm,
sit down with their granddaughter or grandson, but of course I
mhm.
focus on the young ladies
You're
and say,
right.
hey, sweetheart, tell me what's going on at your school with the girls and dating, and just open it up that way. What's going
Mm,
on at your school with girls and dating? What do y'all consider dating? And then maybe share what it was like in her day to kind of make the granddaughter feel a little more comfortable. They may get a chuckle out of it, right?
mm,
That,
right,
oh, well, baby, at my age, well, back in my day, we called it courting. And
right. Okay.
how the young man could come over and meet the parents and sit out on the porch, and that was considered a date, or just holding hands, something of that nature.
Okay.
Something that breaks the ice
Hmm.
so that it's not such an uncomfortable conversation. So
Sure.
that would be my advice.
Excellent, excellent. Now, will you be at the National Black Book Festival coming up in a couple of weeks in Houston?
No, unfortunately, I will not. I actually have prior engagements that weekend, but my book will be there.
Excellent. Excellent,
Yeah.
excellent. Those of you that are listening, if you are in the Houston area the weekend of October 24th through 26th, please, please, please go to the National Black Book Festival, which will be taking place at Fallbrook Church in Houston. Dr. Henry's book will be there, although she will not, however, she is absolutely ready, willing, and able to assist you in starting that conversation, having that conversation, and assisting your young people in making these decisions, making these choices as they move about and grow and uh, experience these different activities. Dr. Henry, thank you so very much for joining me in the kitchen today. Are there any last words you'd like to provide to our listeners?
Yes. One of the things I wanted to make sure I clarified for those who want to purchase their copy of Nia the Numbers Game. Now, in order to get the commemorative pin, they need to order from my website. If they order
Uh-huh.
from Amazon or Barnes and Noble, they'll just get the book. So
Okay,
I
so
want to
remember, you got to order from the website or you're not getting a pen.
clarify. And the other thing is, I would like to invite your audience to
Mhm.
join me every Thursday evening at 7:30 p.m. Eastern for my Let's Talk Thursdays with Dr. Kela. I do a Facebook Live and Instagram Live where I address different topics that affect teenage girls.
Excellent. Yes. Listeners, please, if you have young children, daughters, granddaughters, nieces, family friends and you need some assistance in having these conversations, please tune in 7:30 p.m. on Thursdays for Let's Talk Thursdays with Dr. Kela Henry. Again, Dr. Henry, thank you so very much for joining me in the kitchen today. I so appreciate it. And we will be talking. I'm sure we'll be having additional conversations around these topics as well as others.
Well, Jacqueline, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. And before we go, remember, nothing changes unless you do. Take care. Stay safe, be well, and be blessed. Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Cast Iron Skillet Chronicles with your host, Jacqueline J. Enjoy this podcast? If so, get in on the conversation and invite your sister friends. Join our Facebook group, Cast Iron Skillet Chronicles. Leave a message, ask a question, or suggest topics for upcoming episodes. Until next time, remember, nothing changes unless you do. Stay safe, be well, and be blessed.